I know many of you aren't keeping up with the latest researches and things like that, but it's already proven through one guy and several other geneticists and people who study epigenetics. One person in particular, he spent his whole 30 plus years career wise, not age, but career, 30 years of studying genetics, and he's dedicated those 30 plus years to one specific bacteria, E. coli. And what he's been doing um, was basically causing them to reproduce. In one day, you can get bacteria to, to reproduce 10 generations in the lifespan of a bacteria. So, what we would take um, like 300 years or more to get 10 generations, you could get bacteria to have that in one day. So for the 30 years, he's been able to cultivate 70,000 generations of bacteria. And the reason why many scientists are engaged in this is because they're trying to prove evolution. And all they've proven thus far is that it can't happen. That there is, and this is going to get into the topic of Adam and Eve while I'm mentioning this. And the reason why they're saying it, well, obviously they're not going to admit that it can't happen. They try to use certain terminologies to make it seem like there are still possibilities, but the end result is that it just can't happen. And there seems to be confines, genetic limitations, a box that they can mutate into, but they can't get outside of that box. So no matter how much they mutate, they will always remain a bacteria. But the interesting thing they've discovered is that the E. coli starts out with a certain amount of genetic material. So let's just put a number out there, like 2,000 genes. As the generations increase, the genes either stay the same or they decrease. And the reason why they only decrease is because, or the reason why they decrease is because either the genetic material gets corrupted due to the environment and due to the length of time that that genetic material has lasted throughout, no matter how many generations, because of the time. So not only does time break things down in the moment, it also breaks things down through the genealogy. So the E. coli at the 70,000th generation is less of a bacteria than the very first E. coli that they started with. So how the breakdown happens is either the environment causes it to break down, and the some of the genes literally are broken, and so you come to have less genetic material. And what that does is sometimes either is detrimental to the bacteria or it causes it to mutate. And that mutation most likely, most times, is detrimental to the bacteria. But if it's not, it gives it a certain advantage, which can cause it to be optimal in a certain environment. But it's due to a loss or a broken off of a genome or genetic material that was already there. So never does anything cultivate new genetic material. It only loses genetic material. And this goes with anything else. So for example, wolves, you can have a wolf that becomes, all dogs are wolves. They come from wolves, right? I don't know if you knew that, but so now you have some dogs that are bigger than wolves. So you would think that that dog that is bigger than a wolf and stronger than a wolf and tougher than a wolf and might have a stronger bite than a wolf, you would think that that bigger wolf or bigger dog is genetically better than the wolf, right? Because in all facets of its life, it seems to be better than the wolf. But the reason why you get that dog is actually due to a loss of genetic information from the wolf. Either a loss or a breaking of a genetic material from the wolf. So now, at face value, it may seem like that bigger, stronger wolf or dog is better than the wolf, but in actuality, is less of a wolf. And depending on which genes are broken, that's what causes that dog to be, in your mind, better than a wolf. But that dog has more limitations than the wolf that it came from. Because that wolf, the way God created that wolf has its whole genome. So it can adapt in any environment. Whereas this new dog, even though it seems to in your naked eyes that it's better than this wolf, it it can survive in less amount of environments. So there are ranges of environments that it can survive in, but it can't survive in every single environment like the parent wolf can, right? So let me give you another example. Humans, you start out with certain humans, they have the full genomic spectrum or genome, right? That they have. They start out with. They can survive in anything. They're big boys, okay, and big girls. They can survive in anything. But sometimes you have humans that are bigger, stronger than the parent. So you would think, oh, that's evolution. It's become bigger. Well, it didn't become bigger because of an addition of genetic material that never happens. It's always a loss of genetic material. So that bigger person, stronger person, is less human. It's still human, but understand my terminology, is less of a human than the first one. Why? Because it can survive in less types of environments than the parent one can. And when humans, there's this one I know about because I'm into muscle and all of that. Myostatin is a gene that regulates the amount of muscle you can grow. So it is, while you may think it is good to have more muscle, right? That's how we think it's better. Actually, it shortens your lifespan. It makes you tired faster, and there's a whole bunch of negative things that comes with having a lot of muscle. But that getting bigger and stronger comes from a loss of myostatin, or not necessarily a loss, but a malfunction of myostatin, the gene. So when myostatin is not working optimally, or if it's not working at all, you keep growing. So what that means is that the body is always trying to grow, but myostatin regulates how much muscle you can put on, because having too much is not good, because too much of anything is bad. So here is, you have someone who is bigger, so a certain gene is not being regulated correctly, so they're getting bigger. It's not because they got new genetic information, it's because the genetic information that they had is either not functioning correctly, or is broken, or is lost. You understand? So why am I mentioning all of this? And why has it taken me 8 minutes to explain something simple as what I'm about to talk about? All of this is important. One, to help you to understand that evolution ain't true, because it's now, okay, I have to touch on this also. So the wolf, no matter how much genes are broken off or lost, it will still be a wolf. It'll just be less of a wolf than what it started out as. So a chihuahua is still a wolf, but a chihuahua will never ever become a wolf. And a chihuahua has a very limited type of environment that it can survive in. It won't survive in the wild. A wolf can. That big, stronger wolf, which is a dog, can survive in less environments. So the wolf is actually more prime than this so-called bigger, stronger, tougher dog. But all dogs are wolves. They will never lose their wolfness, no matter how much they mutate or adapt. Humans will always be humans, no matter how much they mutate or adapt. And there is, okay. And there is no environment that can ever cause a human to lose its humanness. It's either it can adapt within the genetic spectrum that it has a capability to adapt in, or it will die. So if the genes that the humans started out with, Adam and Eve, does not have within it the genetic information to mutate into growing gills, to swim, to live underwater, then if ever they're stuck in an environment where it's only water, they will die. They can't adapt to that. There are genetic limitations, and that's what all the bacteria studies has been proven. But without getting too much into that, because I don't want to make it too long. So since we are less human than what Adam and Eve are, but we are still humans. We will always stay in that box. We will never break out of that box. A monkey will always remain a monkey. Chimp always remain a chimp. Chimp, orangutan, they will always remain what they are. But when a creature, think of the genes as, the more genes you have, the more material you have in your toolbox to deal with any situation that may arise. So Adam and Eve were given a full set of toolboxes, a full set of genes. There's a bacteria that lives deep underground, deep in the ocean, with virtually no oxygen. But that bacteria has over 2,000 plus genes. It knows how to survive. It's a big boy. It knows it doesn't need anybody's help because it's fully equipped with everything it needs to do to adapt to any situation. It will always be a bacteria. It will never become a fish. But now, this is the other thing. If it's already perfectly suited for its environment, why would it ever need to evolve into anything? Does a bacteria need to become anything more than a bacteria to keep being a bacteria? No. And if ever anything threatens it, it will just die. It will not evolve to it unless the genetic material gives it the instruction to adapt, right? So, but anyway, that bacteria, because it's fully equipped with all those genes, it has everything it needs divinely to take care of what it needs to take care of. But as that bacteria reproduces, the more time passes, the more generations passes, the less genes will be available to that bacteria. So this first big boy bacteria is a big boy. 70,000 generations later, it's not going to be as much of a big boy as its parent was. So its environment, it will be more prone to diseases, sicknesses. It will die earlier. It will die faster. Humans die much quicker now. We're more prone to diseases now because we have less genes, less toolbox to deal with what we need to deal with. Adam and Eve would not have gotten sick easily as we are getting sick. Even though the environment is terrible, Adam and Eve would have all the genes capable to take care of themselves in this environment. They won't be able to swim and live in the water. They won't be able to breathe underground because their toolbox doesn't come with that. But within the spectrum of where God created them to be, as long as they are breathing oxygen and not breathing in water through gills and adapting oxygen to live, they will live and not die, right? So since Adam and Eve have these full toolbox, their descendants also has that full toolbox. So when Cain sleeps with his sister, their children are not born with defects because their children will have the full toolbox to deal with whatever defects could have arisen. God knows up to which generation incest would not be suitable for the creature, because by this point of the human genome, of the human history, their genome would not have enough genes or would not have enough utensils in their toolbox to deal with the mutations that will arise were they to be in incest relationships like their forefathers had done with their foremothers. You understand? So how do I make this a little bit more? I think you guys already see my drift, right? So God knows that as time goes on, the genetic material would be broken and will be lost. So maybe this is because of imperfection, right? Maybe if we're not imperfect, there will be no problems. And so incest will be okay, even though that's still disgusting, right? But we know it did happen. But why did God allow it to happen then? And then at a certain point in human history, he said, now, basically all of the laws, most of the laws involving sexual immorality is about incestual relationship. Because now we don't have the full toolbox. We don't have the full genome that Adam and Eve had. So the mutations that will arise will be detrimental to us. We won't be able to deal with that. So God is saying that most of the laws are for our health. So it's not just about don't sleep with someone that's close. Don't sleep with the opposite sex that's close to you. It's not so much about that, because if that was disgusting to God, then why would he let Cain marry his sister? So it wasn't so much that him being with his sister was disgusting. No, it was that they're capable of being in that situation and it won't cause a defect in their children. But with us, it will cause a defect in our children. So because of that, God doesn't want anything unclean and impure. So he's saying at this point in time, you are not permitted to have, a brother and a sister being together, because now it'll cause defects. Why? Because we don't have let's say Adam and Eve started out with 5,000 genes, right? And by the time of Noah, it came to like 3,000 genes. And then by the time of Abraham, it came to like 3,000 genes, because there's not enough generations yet to lose that much genetic information. So Abraham married his half-sister, Sarai, who became Sarah, or Abram married Sarai, and then they became Abraham and Sarah. They had enough genetic material, enough of a Swiss knife to deal with whatever problems would arise. So Isaac was healthy. Ishmael came from a different woman, but Isaac was fine. But, Isaac was also a miracle birth, but still, oh, that's the other thing. It wasn't really a natural birth, but still, they had enough genes to take care of the problem. But by the time when Israel became a nation, now the law passed to Moses was no more incest. Because now maybe you only have 2,000 genes. So you have less. Now the thing about it is the genes are still there. The 5,000 hypothetical genes are still there. We just can't tap into it because it's either been blocked or broken or lost. So maybe it's like not really lost. I got to look into what they say about the genetics thing, but it's just an analogy. The point is we have less of what our ancestors, forefathers had. So this is why God permitted Cain to marry his sister, because they had the whole 5,000 genes. It's just a number I'm throwing out there. We only have probably at this point in time, we only have 1,000. So when something like malaria comes around, we get sick and we can't easily adapt to that situation. If Adam and Eve were here, malaria won't be a problem for them. They would take care of that easy. There will be no diseases that will really plague them. They would just die out of old age, which would be like 900 and something years old. You understand? But with us, because we only have 1,000 out of the 5,000, we have less in our toolbox to deal with the problems that will arise. And so we are less human than our forefathers. And this is what epigenetics and the study of genetics has proven. So since we lose genetic information, that means what? If we actually came from a bacteria or cells, eukaryotic cells or prokaryotic cells or whatever, if we actually came from that, then that means that we are who we are because we've lost genetic information. That makes absolutely no sense. And that's what epigenetics, you guys have to look into these things. But the reason why I'm using this for this scenario is because it answers the question a lot of people have been wondering: why would God permit why would God allow Cain to be able, like that wordplay, huh? Why would God allow Cain to be able to marry his sister and reproduce? Because they could take care of that problem. We can't. So, and since it will cause diseases and defects, that's unclean, impure. So God says, no, at this point in time, that is not permitted. But Abraham was allowed to, and before that, they were allowed to. Right? So, all right, y'all, peace. Without making it too long. 20 minutes or 18:40. All right, that's bad.